Well, a very good afternoon to you, and you're welcome to the program. Well, the set is a little different, of course, when you see it different like this, and you know that it's a one-on-one, right? So today we're going to have a personality interview. We'll get entering the quarters of His Excellency Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo to speak with some persons he works with closely at the presidency. And so this afternoon, our guest is Angela Asante, and she is a presidential advisor on gender and development. I know when I mention gender, some of you have some impressions about me, about me when it comes to gender. But come on, I support gender. Okay, I support gender. So we're talking more about it. She's already with me, but let's take a break. When we come back, I'll introduce her, and then we'll let you into her office. Welcome back to the program. It's good afternoon, Ghana. My name is Ania Fuampofo, and I already told you that we're having a personality profile interview this afternoon, and the person we're interacting with is Angela Asante, who is the presidential advisor on gender and development. Introduce or profile. Let me give you a profile. I'll welcome her later. Okay, so if I could have it here, okay. Angela Asante is a presidential advisor, on gender and development for the government of Ghana. Madam Asante provides the key technical and pragmatic direction on gender-related matters, which span the continent and the President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo's role as the African Union champion on gender and development, a social development or protection specialist by profession. And Angela is responsible for the development coordination and implementation of the President's Gender and Development Initiative for Africa. That's GADIA. Can pronounce it GADIA. A continent-wide program with the goals of enhancing women's economic empowerment through private sector and increasing women's political participation. I like that part. All right. So that's the bit about, it goes on to say Ms. Angela has over 20 years of experience in the coordination and implementation of high-level programs for vulnerable and excluded populations in the area of gender protection, livelihood promotion, poverty reduction, mitigation of impacts, conflict prevention, and social performance. And she has worked as a technical advisor in this regard for prominent organizations such as the UNDP, UNICEF, and Africa Development Bank, AFDB. Now, and CEDA as well as in the oil and gas sector. Oh, she must be rich. The oil and gas sector, on the sector, that's on the African continent. So Madam Asante is also credited with being one of the key technical experts to establish and implement Ghana's premier livelihood empowerment against poverty. That's the LEAP cash transfer program and its related national social protection strategy, NSPS, for the next extreme poor. Do I have some more? Looks like the profile is really rich. Okay, well, she's here. So let me just introduce you straight to her. You have an idea of the person we're talking about. Madam Angela, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Annie. Good afternoon.
That's a very rich profile you have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's all by God's grace.
So once we say that we have people like you with such rich profiles, then our gender standard should be at a certain level, maybe better than what we are or where we are today. What will you say to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's no secret that across the world, I mean, there's an ongoing quote-unquote fight for gender parity, gender equality. Those issues are very real in every country. And in Ghana, one thing I must say about my boss, who is very committed to gender issues, and some people are surprised to hear that, but he does have a track record in that area.
Yeah.
He has acknowledged that, for instance, where Parliament is concerned, We have women represented in Parliament, but we don't have enough.
Yeah.
And so it's refreshing to know that a president knows that we have more work to do. So certainly we are still trying to work ourselves out of a job, if you will. So there's more to do, yes.
So if someone asks, your profile is for gender development.
Gender and development.
And development. Does it in any way has anything to do with our Ministry of Gender and Social Protection? Do you intertwine at some point?
Well, we do, in the sense that we sort of work as to complement each other's efforts.
Okay.
And but there are very specific things that the ministry is in charge of as a ministry, and there are very specific things that I work on. So, but we tend to collaborate very well together, and the minister has always been very welcoming, and I try to do the same where she's concerned. So we support each other.
How was it? When did you was your appointment done?
During the first term of the president.
Oh, really? So you've been in the office the whole time?
I have been, yes. And we've done quite a few things, yes. As you said in the profile, rightfully so, my position was born out of the president being named the first ever gender and development leader for Africa under the African Heads of States Committee. And in doing that, he wanted to put together a vehicle that would espouse certain pillars under gender that he could champion. And you mentioned a couple of them, being empowering women through increasing their political participation.
Yeah.
The other is, primarily looking at women's economic empowerment through the private sector as well. But we have also gone on from there to work closely with the AU to develop other pillars that we are also working on. We now, instead of 2, are looking about 8 of these pillars, which includes increasing girls' education or enhancing girls' education, gender-related policy and legislation, ending all forms of violence against women and girls, increasing gender parity. You might also be interested to know, because it's related to one of our pillars, that when President Ramaphosa of South Africa was the head of the Heads of State Committee at the AU, he was very, very adamant that he would work closely with the gender champion, our president, to ensure that a difference would be made, within the continent. And so he concurred with the AU to establish something called the Decade for Women's Economic and Financial Inclusion. So that became another one of our pillars. So these are some of the areas that we are working within. Gender is very broad. And
I wanted to ask you, with your office, is it gender about women, or is just both genders?
Well, one of the other pillars that we look at, not as a solid pillar, but because it's more of a thread that runs through the kinds of things that we do, is something that is being termed positive masculinity. And this was born out of a conference 2 years ago where something called the Kinshasa Declaration was signed by 10 African presidents who all happened to be champions of something under the AU.
Yeah.
And it was held in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where unfortunately we have a very high level of violence against women, sexual assault. And the president of that nation was very adamant that he would hold this conference to demonstrate his commitment to ending these forms of violence in his country and across the continent. Later on, he was actually awarded a championship on positive masculinity and ending violence against women. So what I'm trying to say is that, you know,
So this positive masculinity is a focus on women becoming more empowered. Is that
yes,
what it means?
through men and the education of males.
Okay.
And males who are up and coming, and males who are in positions of power, and males in general in our community. How can they espouse or use their masculinity positively to advance women? Yes. So we don't leave out the males at all. I mean, there's no way that you can develop a nation or a continent or any part of this world when you talk about gender parity and gender equality without involving the opposite sex. So it's very much a part of what we do. But of course, we focus on young girls and women for the obvious reason that we are most vulnerable. Everywhere in the world you go, and you'll be surprised that the economic, I'm sorry, why is their name escaping me, but the World Economic Forum, that's right, they put out a gender parity index and rank a number of the countries on various areas of gender-related issues in their sectors, like that, the parity issues and the equity issues when it comes to education, when it comes to health, when it comes to access to employment, when it comes to women in significant senior management and board positions. And the top 10 countries usually do not include what people will expect. The US, the UK, actually Rwanda is one of them. They've been doing very well, and the rest are mainly the Scandinavian countries.
So I think about a year or two ago, His Excellency attended one of these forums on women or gender, I would say. And there was this video that came out from the forum when he was commenting on the issue of women's participation. And he said, women are not, the question was posed that women should be giving, more space in the governance system. And he said women are not really pushy, and they don't push themselves to the top. So it meant that we have created the space, but it doesn't look like even the women want to fill those spaces. Do you agree with that position? And if you do, how will you explain that to us? Because that became controversial. We haven't really gotten any settlement on that debate.
Well, it was really quite unfortunate because I was there. And I think to a very large extent that people didn't understand where the president was essentially coming from. There are two things that you have to remember here. There are women who don't necessarily need or want to be in a leadership role. And that is fine. You choose your path in life. And you are just as much of a leader as a mother, right, and as a part of your community. You can be just as useful and supportive of women's issues by how you even raise your daughters and your male children. In this particular case, and not to speak for the president, but what I got from it was that the president was speaking from a place of his own frustration that women have the opportunity, at least in Ghana, to push themselves further. And that he also recognizes that there's a place for government and private sector to make those roads clear for them. So, for instance, just to demonstrate that, we instituted an award in his first term, and we'll be doing so again before the end of this last term, which is called the Guardia Advocates Charge Award, and it was mainly for very prominent businessmen, for them to pledge. They all had to pledge an oath that they would create an avenue within their prominent businesses for women to be able to rise to senior levels of their organizations. So I think with that whole video, and it was actually something called the Women Deliver Conference that happened at a few years ago. I think there was a bit of a misconception as to what he actually meant. The president himself has 4 daughters, no sons.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a man who, in my opinion, I have seen want women to fail. And we all know that he was instrumental in getting our affirmative action bill at the time, our domestic violence bill at the time passed. And when he was Attorney General. So there are many things that one can say where he has demonstrated his commitment to women. So that's what I would say about that issue.
So when you, I know we have discussed as media, we have had various debates and discussion about presidential staffers and who are in the presidency and work with him. When you wake up in the morning and prepare and go to work, which is the highest office, what is the daily routine, like in the focus of your office, the gender and development?
Sure. Well, it really depends on what we're working on at the time. In the beginning of the year, we have a big focus on the AU Heads of State meeting that the President attends every year. And so, being that the championship obviously was bestowed upon him by the AU, my office does a lot of work getting him requisite information that he needs to put into a report to update his colleagues and the AU on what is happening not only in Ghana but on the continent. So we, in terms of gender, so we work closely with the Gender Directorate at the AU on that, so in that regard, we have a multi-sectoral presidential coordinating committee. So basically, representatives from all of the ministries that, and all the ministries should, I should take this platform to say that all the ministries really should have a policy on gender for their sector. It's actually mandated, and then gender desk offices. All ministries. In fact, I dare to say that the policy goes further to say all government agencies, but certainly ministries. And this has been another challenge. You find that many ministries have had these documents at a point. Some don't have it at all. And some are outdated. And so this really should be the work program for that ministry and the vision for gender under whether it's agriculture or education or health or what have you. But they should also have gender desk officers that are equipped.
Is that not going to be too much of focus that can create controversy at some point? Because we all know when it comes to gender issues, it gets to a point where it now becomes competitive. More like it, I mean, I saw a post yesterday by one of our movie actresses who is, I would say, a woman advocate, and she was writing about why men do the things they do to women, and that's because when women are rising and they become powerful, they are not able to stand it. So it gets to a point where, the whole thing becomes competitive. So when you are, advising that let's get it into the ministries and get desks for them, is that not too much of breaking it to the minutest, points of policy implementation?
Well, let me say that that policy did not begin with me. This is actually part of the structure of the civil service.
Okay.
So that position actually exists as part.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. And this is why I'm emphasizing on the fact that a lot can be done with the gender desk officers if things are structured properly. And this is one of the things that hopefully before the year is out, I'll be doing more of.
But why haven't they implemented, if it's part of our public service structure?
Well, they do have them, but the unfortunate thing that happens with gender across the world and across various sectors is that it's usually put on the back burner. Okay, so they're not prioritized in terms of their work, and they are not, people are yet to really see gender as a technical area. I mean, all over the world, you can get the highest degrees, PhDs and so forth in gender and women's studies and the like. This is a technical area. This is an area where you need people who understand the issues and how to approach it. Because it's a profession. It's a professional area. It's an area where you have to understand various things about gender budgeting, about how to include women's issues in your work programming and work planning. You have to understand the terrain when you go into certain societies and communities, because there are always cultural issues that surround women. And so therefore it is a technical area. It needs expertise like any other area.
Do you foresee a challenge, because globally we have the issue of LGBT that is slowly creeping into Africa, I should say, maybe, if not already here. Well, it's already here, except that we don't want to legally accept it. So we're fighting for gender, both genders. We're getting to a point where it's almost becoming obligatory that, well, forget this gender thing. Is there a future?
I'm not sure I'm getting your question.
Or you think it will be a struggle? I'm not sure if let me put it this way. You engage in a lot of international activities as far as gender is concerned. Do you at some point face challenges due to these LGBT discussions? Yes.
To date, I have not. Yes, it is a topic that is under discussion all over the world. How every country will respond to it is different, and every country needs to look at the context that they're operating in and ask whether this is something that is going to move and advance the country forward. So it's not a straightforward answer. It's a very new discussion, especially within Ghana. And so I personally haven't had any issues with that yet, either domestically or internationally.
But in the quiet of your room, home, does it cross your mind sometimes, because you are in a technical area and somehow you have the responsibility of protecting these genders? Does it sometimes conflict your work? I mean,
I wouldn't say it conflicts, because like I said, I haven't had a specific case yet to deal with. And I have a bit of a different experience from other people, you know, who might be in an advisory role, especially when it comes to gender. I went to an all-women's college in the United States called Wellesley College. And these were issues that were coming up even when I was there as a student. So they're not strange to me at all. Yeah. So I think the short answer is that we will cross the bridge as it comes. It's something that we need to, again, look at as a nation and decide on what is best for us in that regard, yeah.
I mean, I personally have LGBT friends. And sometimes it's difficult to really know where you stand, as a woman, because I'm a woman, But if a friend of mine comes and says, Annie, I'm no more a man, I'm a woman, I'm sorry.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm not sure what to do, how to receive that. I'm fighting for a woman because a woman, anatomy is very different. They have all kinds of complications. You just will not get it, as a woman. But as a nation, we need to cross a bridge when we get there.
Well, we should remember that no matter what an individual in terms of gender or sex identifies with, what really we should take into consideration is the fact that our Constitution bars any kind of violence or discrimination against any group of people for whatever they classify themselves at. It could be persons with disabilities, it could be women, it could be men, it could be different kinds of people. So when it gets down to whether people should be attacked, whether they should be assaulted, criminal action taken against them, we must go back to the rudiments of what our laws say about the fact that at the end of the day they are people. And if they are Ghanaian people especially, those things should be held up. But Annie, let me just tell you a little bit about what we do at Guardia. I think that's also important. I explained that my position was born out of the African Union Gender and Development Leadership accolade that was bestowed upon the president. Now, we operate on these 8 pillars that I talked about earlier in the program. And we want people to know that the presidency, through my office, when it comes to gender, is open to supporting areas of issues concerning gender and development in those 8 areas in particular. And again, girls' education, gender legislation and policy development, women's financial and economic inclusion, gender parity issues. I could go on. So I get I get the feeling, I should say, in many ways at times, that people have a confusion between my office and the gender minister's office.
Right.
Yes, and really it's just that clear. I mean, the gender ministry has their areas as a ministry that they are responsible for. We call on each other when we feel we need additional support. We collaborate on things together. For instance, if there are things that all sectors are making an input in for the president's consumption, I will make sure that I at least give a heads up to the chief director or the minister herself that this is what is going on. I want a component from you all in there. So it's a complementary relationship, okay. But certainly we are there at the presidency. I listened to an NGO on Star FM a few weeks ago, talking about various things that they want to see done under gender. And the host asked them, well, if you want to engage the executive, have you contacted the presidential advisor on gender? And I think it's because part of my role is sort of backstopping and providing information to the president when it's needed. And not just on the AU issues, but on any issue that he calls me about that is gender related. People may not know that we are there. Yeah. So we are here to say
no, I'm not sure people actually know that you're there.
And it's unfortunate because we've done quite a few awareness creation and programmatic activities that the president himself has been very gracious to attend. And they've always been covered by all the press.
When we have to know your existence, it largely will depend on the media's promotion of your work, speaking to you more. When there are issues come up, we know exactly this one has to go to the presidency, or this one has to go to the ministry.
Sure.
Where do we draw the line? Because we are responsible for that. So
Absolutely.
where do we draw the line? And I know that if anything happens, then I have to come to Angie.
Sure. I mean, with a ministry in general, you would most likely go to them when it deals with issues to do with policy.
Policy, yeah.
And anything that is a program that has come out of a policy, that would be them. So for instance, school feeding, LEAP, you know, things like that are all policy-based interventions that emanated from documents like that. So that would be the ministry. With me, it's more of areas to do with advising the president on situations that have come up with gender-related issues. For instance, we were very involved in this whole witch camp problem that we have in Gambaga and other areas of the north. These are things we bring to the president's attention. We discuss with him when there was the flogging of people, of a young girl in Wa. We spoke about that. So you get my idea that there are specific things, and of course anything to do with the AU that is gender related, and other international organizations, you can clearly also come to us. And
yours is specific to gender.
Ours is specific to gender.
Where the ministry is broader, goes beyond gender.
Actually, the women, okay, because technically they deal with gender, children, and social protection. Right. Yes, but you find that all of those things tie back to gender anyway. So in some ways, some of these issues that would come to my attention would have a social protection component, may have a children's component, very likely, because women and children, their issues are interrelated, especially when it comes to things like poverty. If a woman is poor, unempowered, and she doesn't have, and she has children and doesn't have what she needs to take care of them, obviously they will be affected, but the ministry would be in charge of the programs that government has put in place to try to intervene and provide better livelihoods for these individuals. In fact, that particular ministry I always take my hat off to, because it's a ministry that really is 3 ministries in one. I've consulted in many countries. And
I was disturbed when the minister in charge, former minister in charge of that ministry was absent. And it was a struggle in the media. It definitely trickled onto the public because that ministry, which sometimes we don't even regard the importance of what the role it really has to play. When the minister is not there, you see that, oh, I mean, is that sensitive that it touches the very fabric of the nation?
No, it really does. It is a ministry that, as I was going to say, really could be 3 separate ministries on its own. In many countries that I have visited, you're hard-pressed to see a Minister of Gender, Children and Social Protection, because basically it puts you in charge of taking care of almost all of the vulnerable, and that is a Herculean feat. And I must say that the ministry is doing the best that they can. Every ministry has their challenges, but I believe that the minister is dedicated and is showing more and more of that dedication and commitment to the areas that she's been given to oversee.
So it's still gender because it's everything we do is gender.
Yes.
We find ourselves in a very difficult situation. No employment, it's still gender because men want to work, women want to work.
Sure.
I'm not sure how it's the practicality of it, and therefore I definitely will come to your office. What has been your advice to the president so far on the issue of unemployment? We're dealing heavily with galamsey issues, and sometimes when we're able to recall the men, they will tell you, well, we don't have anything to do. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to come and be armed robbers and things like that? So then you wonder, is this affecting you so much? And what has been your advice to the president? Is it working?
Well, I'll take your question. It's really two questions. Yeah. It's more loaded than just one question. When we talk about extractives, I worked in oil and gas for 5 years. So I understand issues to do with the extractive industries and the challenges that it poses when people get involved, be it illegally, and are making their livelihood from it. However, there needs to be strict regulations around how these extractives are governed everywhere in the world. I mean, Ghana is not an anomaly for environmental reasons, for reasons of safety, you know, and even sometimes for reasons of trafficking children and adults. And you know, having said that, you know, the employment issue, in fact, one of the surveys that I think was the last Living Standard survey talked about the low levels of percentages of women that was represented in employment.
It must fall under one of the 8 pillars you're working on, right?
It would fall under women's economic and financial inclusion. Okay. But one thing we're forgetting, and I always say that I need to talk to my friends at the Statistical Service about this, is how we define employment and how we define work. I think, you know, for the first time, there was a lot of thinking around domestic work that women do and are not necessarily paid for, or they do and they are paid for, and it's not looked at as a way of having a formal income. And that's problematic because then they don't get counted. In many cases. I'm glad to say that our Statistical Service is now taking those things into consideration. A lot of women are involved in the informal sector, in subsistence farming, in domestic work, as I said. Some of these things are not always considered real employment or real work.
Meaning jobs.
Meaning jobs. And they need to be looked at because they are jobs and they are meaningful jobs. And then there are the stay-at-home mothers who take care of their children as their main work. For me, that is also work. And the hours involved should be counted. And it's probably the hardest.
We tend to compare ourselves a lot to the people outside. When they say it in the Ghanaian parlance, "Kuchuchi pongos." Yes. But you know, when you trip on costing in Ghana, you won't get money. If you do it outside, you make a lot of money. So I understand the point you're making, that some of the things we do regularly, even as women, instead of it being regarded as employment, you see them as little, you know, stipends type of jobs.
Right, and we don't even consider them as real work.
Right.
And then there's the whole argument about employment itself. You see, I was very fortunate to come across a very brilliant labor economist, one of our brilliant ones in this country, called Dr. Bob Watson. And he explained to me years ago that there are different kinds of employment. There is obviously full-time and part-time employment, but there's also employment where people have something to do, but they don't work enough to be able to actually make a positive impact on their livelihoods, and so their income isn't enough because of the amount of work that they do. If we were in countries like the United States, we could break that down to hours, because a lot of people are paid in these positions hourly. And so if you're working, you know, 20 hours a week and you have a family and, you know, to support, it will be very difficult for you to support your household and all their needs, shelter, health, education, all the basic needs very adequately. So there's a lot of discussion when it comes to gender as to, you know, what women are actually doing, and is it being counted as real work and employment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let me take a quick breather. When I come back, I'll come and wrap up with Angela Asante. All right, you're welcome back to Good Afternoon Ghana, and we're having a personality profile with Angela Asante. She's Presidential Advisor on Gender and Development. Just in case you don't know, there's an office like that, there is, and she's done a lot, and that's what we've been talking about. Someone says that ask her about her numerous children living on the streets of Ghana and what they are doing to kick children and beggars out of the streets instead of being in schools. And that is a policy, so it will be directed to the Ministry of Social Protection. It's from Joseph Wasa Menfi. I just read it so you know that I've read it. How do you, or will you address a male who approaches your department and describes himself as a woman with a problem of discrimination? Bafor sends that in. I'm sure we've addressed that, right? Before I actually got the messages, so we'll move on. So, you know, in the last few minutes in your office, I mean, what you've been doing, what you've
been fortunate to do a lot. I can't overemphasize the fact that GADIA, the Gender and Development Initiative for Africa, which we run, is really the president's program. And so we work to espouse his vision on areas that he wants to hopefully make an impact on in gender. In the past, we've done programs on female refugees and what can be done to improve their situations. We've introduced what I told you about, the GACH Awards, that charges prominent businesses to make an inroads for women who are, you know, at junior management levels or below, to be able to work themselves up through the channels and become members of senior management or board members even. We've done presidential open houses with various women's sectors of women, from, I was going to say women's groups, which is also true, but we had amazing representation from the judiciary, from the armed forces, from teachers, both at the tertiary level and the basic and SHS level. We have done programs in other African countries that look at increasing gender equality.
Did these programs yield results that you have gone back to do a monitoring activity and gotten the feedback that, oh, this program we held here, we got about 10 girls who benefited something from it, and it has yielded, you know, positive results? Because normally that is where our interest or focus is. It's not the program, but the feedback, the impact.
Well, let me tell you that, I mean, I've never been one to feel that I've done a job if the impact is not realized.
Right.
But remember that real sustainable impact comes several years down the line. So before I will leave this office, we will have an evaluation of what these programs yielded, what kind of positive impacts. But many of them also were done to create awareness on the issues. There are people who don't even know that in refugee camps, for instance, the experience of females and males are very different. And protections need to be put in place. We've done a lot of media work surrounding and even been to the north to talk to leaders that are in the respective areas where witches camps are, to discuss what the way forward is, you know.
You're making progress?
The president has been very supportive, and we are still working on with them because it's a process. Some of these women have been there almost all their lives. Reintegration into society is one option if they have family members that will take them in. Some of them cannot go back to their communities and don't want to. So we need to look at what would be the alternatives.
Wow.
Yes, well, I mean, you've been stigmatized as a witch. It will take a lot in some cases for a community who might have a very strong belief in that regard to say, okay, she's accused, but she's out now, so let's take her back. And we don't want people to be re-victimized, So a lot of these issues are long-term, and they need to be looked at as such.
Do you have, someone said this, let me read this before I ask you maybe the final question. It says that, good afternoon to you. I want to commend your guest for the wonderful job she and her team are doing at the presidency. I know a lot have been achieved through her office, but if she can go further to advise the president on, through the policies outlined, do away with taxes on sanitary pads, which most of our young girls cannot afford. It's from Bernard B. The Bridge Foundation, Ghana.
I think that point is well taken, and it's already something that has been in discussion at the presidency. We are working on it.
What was the difficulty? Why is this even being discussed? This is, yes, remove the taxes.
Well, there are processes that it has to go through. It's not just as easy as the president waving a wand and say, be gone, We need to make sure that it's done and once and for all, and especially when we have currencies that are not always stable. But in terms of our future of what we want to do, we are currently in the process of organizing forums for women who are owners of small and medium and micro level businesses related to the impact that they would actually feel as a business person now that the IMF program has come on board. We want to look at partnerships with places like the Peace Council and how we can ensure that key groups of women and the community level are involved in peace building, especially now that we're coming into an election year. We have a few very, very innovative things that are planned, and we are hoping that...
Did you grow up in Ghana?
I grew up, okay, so long story. I was born in Ghana, spent some formative years here, and then moved to the US because my parents had an appointment by an international organization. But a lot of my tertiary education went back and forth between the US and Ghana because of the kind of work. I always knew I wanted to get into international development. And, when I graduated with my first degree, for instance, after less than a year, I applied to an organization here that gave me a consultancy, and I moved to Ghana. It's been back and forth, but mainly for the past several years, I've been anchored in Ghana. Yeah.
We'll come to your office again, definitely. This is maybe just an introduction to, Ghanaians on what we have at the presidency.
Yes.
We'll get to you again on some more detailed programs you've been running from your office and the advice you've been giving to the president. We'll talk more about that. I'm so grateful you came on the program.
Thank you for having me. And I have to mention that I also am a mother of two wonderful children, Eden and Jairus, who keep me on my toes. And I think that being a mother is probably the most difficult job you will ever have in this world, to shape the perspective and the repertoire of another human being is not a small task. So my hat goes off to all women and all mothers who are not even counted in that regard.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Angela Asante is the advisor to the president on gender and development. My name is Ania Fompofo. We're grateful you came through, and thank you for watching. Good afternoon.